Okay, so I want you to picture a scene. It is Baghdad, early 9th century.
Right, right. The absolute peak of the Islamic Golden Age.
Exactly the peak. You've got the House of Wisdom, you've got scholars translating Aristotle and Plato. I mean, the science and philosophy are just exploding.
It was essentially the most intellectual, sophisticated city on Earth at the time.
Yeah, it was. If you were a thinker, a scientist, Baghdad was where you had to be. But then, and this is where I want to set the stage cut to this dark, gritty cell in the profound depths of a prison.
Quite the contrast.
Right. There is an old man, a highly respected scholar, being stripped and publicly whipped. And we aren't talking about a slap on the wrist here.
No, this is brutal, near-death flogging.
Fainting, waking up, being whipped again. And outside, the city is just, going about his highly civilized business while this is happening.
And I think the craziest part about this is that he isn't a revolutionary.
Right, he's not a warlord.
He's being tortured by the government, by the caliph himself, because of a debate over a theological definition.
Which is just wild to think about today. And that is the hook for today's deep dive. We are looking into the life of Ahmad ibn Hanbal.
Known as the Lion of Baghdad.
The Lion of Baghdad, yeah. He's the founder of the Hanbali School of Law and the compiler of what is basically one of the biggest books in human history, the Musnad.
A book that frankly changed the way history was recorded in the Islamic world.
It totally did. And our mission today is to figure out why this man was willing to be tortured for years over a metaphysical definition, why he refused to eat watermelons, of all things, because of a missing text.
That's a great story.
We'll get to it. And we want to explore how his obsession with collecting everything created a massive data archive that modern science and theology are actually still fighting over today.
It really is a story about the ultimate clash between reason and revelation, logic versus the text.
So let's lay out our sources first. We are basing this entire deep dive on a comprehensive research paper that covers 100 critical and, honestly, taboo questions about his life.
Ranging from sectarian critiques to modern scientific analysis of his hadith collection.
Exactly. And just to be clear up front, we are not taking sides on any of the politically or religiously charged stuff we're about to discuss.
Yeah.
We're just here to impartially break down what the source material says.
Just delivering the ideas.
Right. So let's start with that clash you mentioned, because to a modern listener, the idea of getting whipped over a theological debate sounds, well, kind of insane.
Yeah.
What was the context here? You sent over some notes on the Mina.
Yeah, the Mina. It's usually translated as the Inquisition. This was the brainchild of the Abbasid caliphs, specifically Al-Mamun and later Al-Mutasim.
Okay.
Now, you have to understand, these guys weren't uneducated thugs. They were intellectuals. They were obsessed with Greek philosophy, rationalism, and specifically the Mutazila school of thought.
The rationalists.
Yes. They believed that human reason was the ultimate tool to understand God.
Which sounds pretty modern, actually.
Very much so. They thought that if something in the scripture didn't make logical sense, you had to interpret it metaphorically until it did. And their big sticking point, the hill they chose to die on, was the nature of the Quran itself.
Right.
They said the Quran was created by God at a specific point in time.
Okay, created. And the traditionalists, the group Ahmad ibn Hanbal belonged to, they said it was uncreated, right?
Yes.
It was God's eternal speech.
Exactly.
Now, I have to play devil's advocate here. To me, that sounds like splitting hairs. Created, uncreated. Why did the state care enough to torture people over it? Why does it matter to an emperor?
It totally sounds like semantics to us, but back then, it was actually about raw political power.
How so?
Think about it. If the Quran is created, it's an object. It's a creature.
Right.
And like any creature, it can be interpreted, contextualized, and maybe even overruled by the caliph's superior, divinely guided intellect.
Oh, I see where this is going. So if it's created, the caliph, who is supposed to be the shadow of God on earth, has authority over it.
Exactly. He can say, well, God created this text for that specific time, but my reason says we need to do this other thing now.
Wow. But if the Quran is uncreated?
If it's uncreated, it is co-eternal with God. It is absolute divinity. It stands above the caliph.
The caliph can't touch it.
He is subject to it, just like the poorest peasant in the street.
So by forcing everyone to say it was created, the caliphs were essentially asserting the supremacy of state reason over religious text.
Precisely. It was a massive power grab disguised as theology.
That makes way more sense. It's always about power.
Always. And the caliph demanded that every judge and scholar in the empire sign a confession agreeing to this created view. He sent letters to the governors saying, test the judges. If they don't agree, fire them. or worse.
And what happened? Did they agree?
Almost all of them folded.
Really? All these great scholars just caved.
They did. But they used a legal loophole called taqiyya.
Taqiyya, which means what exactly?
Basically, permissible lying or dissimulation. They argued, look, I'm being threatened with death or prison. I'll just say what the caliph wants to hear. But in my heart, I know the real truth.
Very pragmatic. Survive to fight another day.
Exactly. But Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he didn't take the loophole.
He refused point blank, right?
He did, and this is what makes his character so fascinating. He wasn't just a private citizen, he was seen as an imam, a major public leader.
So his actions carried weight.
Huge weight. He famously said, if the scholar answers with taqiyya and the ignorant remain in ignorance, when will the truth ever be revealed?
That is heavy. He's saying, if I lie to save my skin, the common people will think the lie is the truth.
And he'd be responsible for misleading them forever.
He viewed himself as a firewall.
A firewall is the perfect word. If he broke, the orthodoxy broke. So he took the torture. The sources say he was imprisoned for 28 months.
2.5 years in a medieval dungeon.
And dragged before the court, interrogated by judges and philosophers. They would ask him these complex logical traps, and when he wouldn't engage with their logic, he just kept quoting scripture.
Just sticking to the text.
The Quran says X, the Hadith says Y. It was infuriating for the rationalists. So they resorted to force. They flogged him.
And the descriptions in the research paper are just gruesome.
Incredibly so.
Yeah.
He was beaten until he lost consciousness, released, and then lived the rest of his life with permanent physical damage.
The paper also mentioned the psychological toll.
Yes, modern analysis of the historical sources suggests he showed clear signs of PTSD, social withdrawal, hypervigilance. He spent his later years almost entirely in isolation.
He became a total recluse.
But he won. Eventually, the state gave up.
Because torturing the most popular guy in Baghdad is bad for optics.
Bad for optics and bad for stability. The people loved him. Riots were threatening to break out. So the caliphate ended the Inquisition.
And Amma emerged as the hero of orthodoxy.
Absolute street cred. He was the man who beat the emperor.
Which brings me to this huge paradox in the notes. You have this guy who defied the state, who was tortured by the caliphs. You would expect him to come out of prison and lead a massive revolution.
Burn the palace down.
Right, overthrow the corrupt government.
But he preached the exact opposite. He was a radical quietist.
Quietism. Explain that to the listener.
He strictly forbade any armed rebellion against the ruler, even the ruler who whipped him, even the ruler who tried to forcibly change the religion.
That seems incredibly contradictory. I will defy you to your face, but I won't let anyone overthrow you.
His famous maxim was, 60 years of an unjust ruler is better than one night of lawlessness.
Wow.
It's because he feared fitna civil war, chaos more than tyranny. He lived through civil wars. He saw what happens when central authority collapses.
Society just breaks down.
Right. If society collapses into anarchy, you can't even practice your religion. The roads aren't safe for pilgrimage. The mosques aren't safe for prayer. He believed law and order, even an unjust order, was the prerequisite for faith.
So it's a stance of endurance. You take the beating, you hold the truth, but you do not burn the house down.
Exactly. And that endurance is what allowed him to focus on his life's real work, the Musnad.
Let's pivot to the book. Because if Ahmad is the firewall, this book is the database he was protecting. I've heard the Musnad described as massive, but give us a sense of scale.
It is colossal. We are talking about somewhere between 27,000 and 40,000 narrations.
Which are called hadiths. And for listeners who might not know, a hadith is a report of what the Prophet Muhammad said, did, or approved of. The second source of Islam after the Quran.
Right, and usually when people hear about a hadith collection, they think of Sahih Bukhari.
The gold standard in the Sunni world.
Exactly. But Ahmad's Musnad is completely different from Bukhari.
How so?
Think of Bukhari as a curated museum exhibit. Bukhari was a strict filter. He looked at hundreds of thousands of reports and said, I'm only going to include the ones that are 100% authentic, platinum grade, undeniable.
He threw out anything sketchy, the best of the best.
Yes. But Ahmad was building an archive. He wasn't a curator, he was a librarian.
Okay, so a different mission entirely.
His goal was to preserve everything that had even a decent chance of being true. He basically said, I'm going to save all the data, even the stuff that's a bit fuzzy, so that future scholars have the raw materials to work with.
So if Bukhari is the greatest hits album, the Musnad is the entire studio recording session, the outtakes, the warm-ups, All of it.
That is a perfect analogy, and this leads to one of the most controversial things about his method. He famously said, "A weak hadith is dearer to me than the opinion of men."
A weak hadith. I mean, that sounds bad. Why would anyone prefer weak evidence over rational, logical opinion? It sounds almost anti-intellectual.
We have to be really careful with the word weak here. In his time, the terminology wasn't as rigid as it became later.
Okay.
When Ahmad said weak, he didn't mean fake or fabricated. He meant what later scholars would call fair or Hassan.
So maybe the narrator had a bad memory or was getting old.
Exactly. Maybe the guy was honest but got confused sometimes. Ahmad's logic was, I would rather trust a slightly shaky report that might actually come from the prophet than trust the brilliant, pristine logic of a philosopher in Baghdad.
He wanted to minimize human interference at all costs.
He trusted a grainy, blurry photograph of an event more than a beautifully painted picture of what someone thought the event looked like.
The source code mentality again. Even corrupted data from the source is better than a patch written by a user.
Spot on. And this obsession with data led to some staggering numbers. There's a claim in the sources that Ahmad memorized 1 million hadiths.
Okay, I have to call a flag on the play there. 1 million unique sentences. That seems physically impossible for a human brain.
It does sound impossible. But there's a technical nuance here. In hadith science, they don't just count the text, the matan. They count the chain of transmission. Is not.
Break that down for me.
Say you have one sentence, actions are by intentions. If 10 different people narrated that to me through 10 different chains of reporters, like person A told B told C, and in another chain, person X told Y told Z, that counts as 10 hadiths.
Ah, I see. So he memorized the paths of information, not just a million unique pieces of information.
Right. The million refers to the chains. Still a superhuman feat of memory, but within the realm of possibility for a guy who literally did nothing else for 50 years.
Now, because he was an archivist and not a filter, the Musnad contains some stuff that, well, let's just say it raises some modern eyebrows. The research paper calls these the taboo or controversial sections.
Oh, yes. Because he preserved so much raw data, he included narrations that modern critics, atheists, and even other Muslim sects point to today as problematic or unscientific.
Let's look at the science clashes first. There's the famous fly hadith.
The one that says if a fly falls in your drink, dip it all the way in, because one wing has the disease and the other wing has the cure.
Which to a germ-conscious modern person just sounds repulsive. It sounds like medieval folklore.
It totally does. But this is where the paper's deep dive gets really interesting. It highlights that in recent years, there's been a push by some researchers to defend this scientifically.
Defend dipping a fly in your drink. How?
Some microbiologists point to bacteriophages.
Bacteriophages, viruses that kill bacteria.
Exactly. They are often found on the surface of insects like flies. The modern apologetic argument is that the quote-unquote cure mentioned is actually a biological counteragent carried by the fly itself, like a microbial warfare happening on the fly's body.
Huh. So the argument isn't that it's magic. It's misunderstood biology.
That's the defense being made today, yes.
Yeah.
They argue the text was describing a biological reality in the language of the 7th century. But for Ahmad, he didn't know about bacteriophages, he just trusted the text.
Then there's the one about Adam's height.
Right. The narration that God created Adam as 60 cubits tall.
Which is about 90 feet or 27 meters.
Yeah.
Now, I remember from physics class the square cube law. If a human was 90 feet tall, their volume and mass would increase way faster than their bone strength.
Their bones would snap under their own weight.
Exactly. They couldn't oxygenate their blood. Biology just does not work at that scale.
Correct. And here, the defenses in the source literature vary wildly. Traditional scholars take a metaphysical route.
They say it's just a different realm.
Basically, they say this refers to Adam in paradise. Paradise is a different dimension with different physics, no problem.
The metaphysical out. But what about the others?
Others propose a theory of genetic entropy, the idea that humanity has been biologically devolving or shrinking from a massive primordial state over millennia.
That's a much harder sell scientifically.
It is, but it shows how intensely people grapple with the raw data in Ahmad's archive. They are trying to force modern science to fit the ancient text.
It's fascinating how people try to bridge that gap. And then we have the camel urine.
I knew we'd get there. The narration prescribing camel urine and milk for people suffering from dropsy or edema
Is probably one of the most mocked hadiths on the internet.
It is. But again, the research points to actual modern pharmaceutical studies. Apparently, camelid systems are very different from other mammals.
Real.
Yeah, their urine contains unique nanobodies and specific proteins that act as powerful diuretics. There are ongoing studies investigating these components for cancer treatments and liver issues.
So the takeaway isn't necessarily that we should all start drinking it at breakfast, but that dismissing it entirely as primitive nonsense might actually be premature.
Exactly. It was a harsh desert medicine. Ahmad's perspective would be, I don't care if it sounds gross to you. The prophet said it, so there is wisdom in it, whether I currently understand the biology or not.
That attitude, I trust the text over my own disgusted reaction, that bleeds into his theology too, doesn't it?
Big time.
Which brings us back to those rationalists we talked about at the start.
Sure.
They didn't care about flies. They cared about how you describe God.
Right. The Musnad contains hadiths that describe God in ways that sound very physical. God descending to the lowest heaven, God having a hand, God placing his foot in hellfire.
And the rationalists, the Mu'tazila, absolutely hated this.
They said, you are making God into a giant human in the sky. That's anthropomorphism. That's idolatry.
So how do they handle those texts?
They interpreted the words as metaphors. Hand just means power. Descending just means his mercy comes down. They wanted to sanitize the text to make it logically pure.
But Ahmad refused to use metaphors.
He used a very specific formula, bilatif, which translates to, without asking how.
Unpack that, because honestly it sounds a little bit like a cop-out.
It's actually a very rigid philosophical stance. He would say, the text says hand, so I say hand, but I do not say it is a physical limb like mine, and I absolutely do not ask how it exists.
So he affirms the word itself, but blocks the imagination.
He walks a tightrope. He won't explain it away with a metaphor, but he refuses to visualize it as a physical thing either. It's a total refusal to speculate.
He viewed the rationalists' attempts to logically explain God as arrogance.
Exactly. He wanted to leave the divine mystery intact. He felt that once you start using human logic to explain God, you end up worshiping your own logic, not the God of the text.
This rigidity, this absolute refusal to speculate beyond the data, it bled into his personal life in ways that are, frankly, baffling. Which brings us, finally, to the watermelon.
The watermelon story. It's the ultimate example of his methodology and practice. It's almost funny, but it was deeply serious to him.
Explain this to me. Why did this brilliant scholar refuse to eat a watermelon?
It wasn't that he thought watermelons were forbidden. He actually knew for a fact the prophet ate them, but he couldn't find a single hadith that described how he ate them.
You are kidding.
Not at all. Did he slice it? Did he bite into it? Did he cut the rind off first?
He just didn't have the data.
Ahmad couldn't find the instruction manual, and because he was so obsessed with emulating the prophet perfectly, he preferred to abstain entirely rather than risk doing it wrong.
That is next-level commitment.
It's extreme textual reliance. If the archive doesn't have an instruction for it, he freezes. He was essentially paralyzed by a lack of data.
I imagine that attitude made him some enemies outside of just the rationalists. We talked about them. But what about the Shia? How do they view this archive of everything? Because Ahmad is heavily viewed as a Sunni hero.
It's a complicated relationship. The Shia critique highlighted in the research is usually a cauldron of bias. Did this Sunni scholar suppress the virtues of Ali and the Prophet's family?
Because the political climate at the time was very anti-Ali.
Very, but paradoxically, he didn't suppress it. The Musnad actually contains more hadiths praising Ali than almost any other major Sunni collection.
Really? Why?
Because remember, Ahmad is an archivist. He's collecting everything. If the data existed and the chain was okay, he put it in the book.
But there's a catch with the Shia critique.
There is. The critique focuses on his sources. Ahmad prioritized the isnad chain of reliability above the narrator's political views.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning, if a narrator was a known Nasibi, someone who actively hated Ali, but was widely known to be strictly truthful in their speech and memory, Ahmad would accept their hadith.
Wow. So he would trust an honest enemy over a liar who agreed with him.
Exactly. He completely separated their political bias from their transmission reliability.
I can see why the Shia would reject that. To them, hating the Prophet's family is a disqualifier. You can't be a truthful person if you hold that hatred.
Right, but to Ahmad, it was objective data collection. Is he a liar? Does he hallucinate? No. Then I take the data. He was trying to be an honest broker of information in the middle of a sectarian war zone.
So as we wrap this up, I'm trying to synthesize all these pieces. We have a guy who withstood brutal torture to save the uncreated nature of the Quran. We have a guy who compiled a massive archive, flies, camel urine, and all because he was terrified of losing the source code.
And a guy who wouldn't eat fruit without step-by-step instructions.
Exactly. I think the best way to understand Ahmad ibn Hanbal is to go back to that word we used earlier, a firewall.
Yes. He lived in a time when Greek philosophy, Persian statecraft, and rationalist theology were flooding into the Islamic world.
The system was being overwhelmed.
And he was terrified that the original message, the raw revelation, was going to be edited, diluted, or just explained away by clever men using foreign logic.
So he locked the system down. He closed all the ports.
He prioritized preservation over logic. He wanted to save the text at all costs. And historically speaking, he succeeded. The Musnad is that preserved database. He ensured that the traditionalist view survived the rationalist onslaught.
But there's a massive critique that comes with that success, right? The idea that he killed philosophy in the Islamic world.
And that is the big historical debate. Critics argue that by crushing the rationalists and basically banning speculative theology, Ahmad helped close the gates of independent reasoning.
Setting the civilization on a path of looking backward at old texts instead of forward with new logic.
Right, so the question is, was he the savior of the faith or the jailer of the mind? Depending on who you ask, a modern Salafi scholar or a liberal reformist, you'll get two completely contradictory answers. But you cannot deny the magnitude of the man's impact.
That is a heavy note to end on, but leaves us with something really provocative to think about, especially today.
How so?
Think about our modern digital age. We are obsessed with archiving everything. We hoard raw data, algorithms scrape every piece of information without filtering for context or logic. Are we becoming like Ahmad's archive, just preserving the data without applying human logical curation? And does that freeze our own societal intellect?
That's a fascinating parallel. Preserving everything doesn't necessarily mean understanding everything.
Exactly. That definitely gives you a lot to mull over.
Yeah.
And it certainly makes you look at a watermelon differently.
It really does. You'll always wonder if you're slicing it right.
A huge thanks to our experts and researchers for digging up these sources. There's so much more in the Musnad to explore, but we will leave it there for this deep dive.
Until next time.
Thanks for listening.